The wind howled across the Atlantic, slamming waves against the aging hull of the Mary Grace, a trawler that had weathered more storms than anyone cared to count. The sky above was a furious bruise of purple and grey, streaked with lightning. Jack Mallory cursed under his breath as he wrestled with the net, soaked to the bone and numb with cold. At 67, he moved slower than he used to, but stubbornness kept his hands firm and steady. He hauled the final net over the railing, grunting with effort as it spilled a chaotic mess onto the deck. Flounder, kelp, a few crabs, and something odd, something square. It clanked against the metal floor with a dull thud. Jack narrowed his eyes. It looked like a camera. A thick waterproof one, battered and crusted over with barnacles, bits of seaweed wrapped around it like ribbons. It didn't belong there, not with the fish. He knelt down, brushing away the grime, fingers tracing the scratched plastic. There were no logos, no markings, just a dull black casing and a lens that stared back at him like a dead eye. For a moment he considered tossing it overboard, thinking it junk, but something about the way it had lodged itself in the net, stubborn, insistent, made him pause. Storms brought all kinds of things from the deep, tires, old fishing gear, even shoes. But a sealed, intact camera. He turned it in his hands. The hatch on the side was still secure. Waterproof, professional grade, clearly not a tourist's toy. Whoever had owned this had money or a mission. Jack stood there for a while, letting the waves slam against his boat, the sky rumbling above like the belly of some sleeping beast. Then, without saying a word, he slipped the camera into his jacket pocket and turned back toward the wheelhouse. Before we dive deeper into this chilling mystery, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Stories like this? They're just the beginning of what's hidden beneath the surface. By the time he made it back to the harbor, the storm had passed, leaving only slick pavement and the scent of wet salt in the air. He docked quietly, ignoring the few others packing up their gear. Jack never talked much. Not since the accident. Not since his son. At home, he placed the camera on the kitchen table, still dripping with seawater. The cottage was small and spare, built more for function than comfort. A fireplace crackled quietly in the corner, but Jack didn't go near it. He stared at the camera instead. Curiosity gnawed at him like salt on skin. He fetched a screwdriver and delicately pried open the latch. Inside, miraculously, the battery pack looked intact. Even more surprising, a memory card, barely visible, tucked into a tiny slot. Jack slid it out carefully, wiped it dry, and stared at it. He didn't own a computer. Technology wasn't his thing. He lived by the tides, not by wires and screens. But someone else could help. Someone who knew how to dig into things. Someone who still believed there were answers in the dark. The thought made his chest tighten. He hadn't spoken to her in years, not since the expedition, not since her team vanished. Still, he knew what he had to do. He wrapped the camera in an old towel, sat down at the table, and stared out the window toward the black horizon. The ocean was calm now. Deceptive, hiding its secrets beneath a glassy surface. Something about that camera felt wrong. Not just strange, wrong. Like it hadn't drifted into his net by chance. Like it wanted to be found. Jack Mallory didn't much care for people anymore. He had his boat, the ocean, and a schedule that didn't require conversation. Most mornings, he was out before the sky turned pale, boots hitting the dock with the kind of rhythm only decades of repetition could create. The harbor knew him, not in the friendly sense, but in the way one might know a rock that never moved, a fixture, a ghost that smelled like brine and diesel. His hands were thick, calloused, and stained with oil and salt. A gold wedding ring still clung to his left finger, though the woman who gave it to him had been buried almost 20 years. Beside her, their only child, Noah, lay in a grave marked with shells and faded flowers. The boy had been 17 when he vanished at sea, caught in a squall that swallowed both his kayak and his future. Jack never forgave the ocean, but he couldn't leave it either. He lived alone in a weather-beaten house on the edge of the cliffs, where gulls screamed into the wind and the spray never stopped. Inside, it smelled like tobacco and old rope. Photos lined the walls, black and white shots of his father's fishing days, color prints of a young Noah holding up his first catch, wide-eyed and sunburnt. Some nights, Jack still heard his son's voice in his dreams. The same question over and over. "You still mad at me, Dad?" And every time Jack would wake up reaching cold sweat on his brow, breath caught in his throat like a net. The ocean took things, but it didn't return them. Until now. He sat at the kitchen table the next morning, fingers drumming against the side of his mug, the camera resting in front of him like an unwanted visitor. He hadn't slept much. His thoughts had kept circling back to the memory card, to the possibility, no, the certainty, that something strange had washed into his life. He remembered Emma, not well, not warmly, but with a clarity that came from shared grief. She'd been part of a different world, young, curious, brilliant in a way that rubbed him raw. She'd tried once to interview him for a research project about ocean patterns. He'd brushed her off. Later, after the expedition disappeared, he'd seen her again, standing alone on the dock, white-faced and hollow-eyed. She had been close to someone on that crew. Maybe too close. He'd said nothing then, just nodded once and turned away. But she would know what to do with a memory card like this. She would know how to see what he couldn't. Jack took a long breath, his chest aching with something heavier than time. The house was quiet, save for the ticking of a chipped clock on the wall. He reached for the card and placed it gently into a small plastic bag. He didn't tell himself it was for closure. That word didn't mean anything to him. Nothing ever closed, not really. But he couldn't ignore the camera. Not after the voice in the storm. Not after the gut-deep certainty that something was off. Something wanted out. Grabbing his coat, he stepped into the wind. The docks shimmered with salt mist, and seagulls wheeled in lazy spirals above. His truck coughed awake, a grumbling engine protesting the morning cold. He drove toward the Institute slowly, each mile a memory. The shoreline blurred past, dotted with the bones of shipwrecks and abandoned houses. Every now and then, he'd glance at the bag on the passenger seat. He didn't know what it would show, but he knew who needed to see it. The building loomed over the docks like a relic from another age, part marine research station, part faded dream. Its windows were fogged with salt, its siding cracked from years of briny wind. Jack stood at the entrance longer than he should have, the plastic bag clenched in his fist. Emma Grayson wasn't at the front desk. The grad assistant, a pale kid with caffeine stains on his sleeves, didn't recognize Jack but showed him down the hall when he muttered her name. The lab smelled of ethanol and metal. Monitors blinked, tanks gurgled softly. It felt like stepping onto a different kind of boat, one that dove into the unknown without ever leaving shore. Emma was bent over a microscope, jotting something into a worn notebook. Her hair was darker than he remembered, pulled into a messy braid, and there were new lines at the corners of her eyes. Grief lines, maybe. Jack cleared his throat. She looked up, eyes narrowing as recognition bloomed. "Jack Mallory." "Didn't know where else to take this," he said, holding out the bag. "Found it in my net. Storm last night." She stared at the memory card, then back at him. "What is it?" "Something I shouldn't have, maybe something no one should." He left it at that. She didn't ask more, just nodded slowly and turned to her computer. Jack stood awkwardly as she inserted the card into a reader. The screen flickered to life, showing file names, long strings of numbers and letters, no labels. Emma clicked on the first one. A video opened. Darkness. Then the flicker of a diving light sweeping over jagged rocks. Bubbles rose, and for a few seconds all was calm, normal even. Then came the shapes. Blurred silhouettes moved in the background, far off but oddly synchronized. A diver's breathing echoed through the audio, shallow, hurried. The camera shook as it turned toward a trench that yawned like an open wound in the seafloor. Jack shifted uncomfortably. Emma leaned in. The next video was shorter, static at first, then a woman's voice, gasping, "If you find this, crackle." "Don't go back." Another burst of static and then silence. Emma froze. "That voice," she whispered. "I've heard it before." Jack didn't speak. They opened more files, grainy images, clips cut mid-motion, bursts of sound that didn't match the visuals. One video showed a diver's hand reaching toward something just out of frame, the fingers trembling. Another showed something else entirely, barely visible, almost indistinguishable from the shadows, but there, watching. Emma played the final file. It was corrupted, skipping frames like a broken metronome. The footage was deep, deeper than typical recreational dives. The pressure at that depth would crush bones, but whoever filmed it kept going. The screen shimmered with blues and blacks, then turned green, then red, distorting like heat waves underwater. And then it froze. Not in technical failure, but in terror. A flash of white eyes, elongated limbs, not quite human. And the diver's voice again, panicked, screaming into the mask, "It's not supposed to be there." The screen went dark. Neither of them moved. Jack exhaled slowly. Emma turned to him. "Where did you find this again?" 50 miles east of the canyon line, off the usual paths. "You should have left it there." Jack almost agreed, but he didn't say so. Emma backed up the files quickly, her hands moving faster now, her posture tense. She didn't say what she was thinking, but Jack saw it in her eyes, recognition and something else, fear. He looked down at the camera still resting on the desk, its lens pointed nowhere, blank, unblinking. "What you think this is?" he asked. Emma didn't answer right away. She stared at the screen again, lips pressed tight. "I think someone went looking for answers," she said at last, "and found something that didn't want to be found." Emma Grayson had grown up in Anchorage, where the sea was cold and the questions endless. She'd always been drawn to what people couldn't explain. Her father had worked offshore rigs, her mother in environmental law. Between them, Emma had learned that the ocean gave nothing freely, and when it did, it usually demanded something back. By 29, she had spent more time underwater than most divers twice her age. She'd completed a master's degree in marine ecology, then turned her focus toward anomalies, disappearances, odd current patterns, sudden signal dropouts in otherwise safe waters. Some called it a waste of academic energy. Others whispered conspiracy. Emma didn't care. She wanted the truth, no matter how far down it was buried. When the research team vanished 2 years ago, it had nearly broken her. She hadn't been on the vessel. A stomach virus had kept her grounded. She still remembered waking up feverish, seeing the news alert on her phone. Oceanic research crew missing, last contact over Hudson Canyon. Dr. Caleb Rowe had been aboard. Mentor, colleague, friend, maybe more. He believed the trench held secrets from a time before maps. Now he was gone, the whole crew gone, and no one wanted to ask why. Emma did. The memory card brought everything back in a rush. She hadn't thought about Caleb's voice in months, but she recognized it instantly in one of the corrupted clips. A background murmur, unmistakable. The same cadence, the same clipped intensity. It wasn't just the panic in the diver's voice, it was who was panicking. Jack hadn't said much as they watched the videos, but Emma could feel his unease growing. His presence was heavy, silent, like a wall built out of grief. She remembered hearing about his son, the disappearance, the failed search. The ocean had stolen from him too. She didn't trust easily, but something about Jack's posture, the way he carried loss like ballast, made her not question his intentions. He wasn't here for answers. He was here because he'd seen something he couldn't ignore. After the last video ended, she stood up abruptly. "I need better resolution. There might be embedded coordinates." Jack raised an eyebrow. "You think someone left a trail?" "I think they left a warning. And we need to know why." She guided him deeper into the lab, unlocking a workstation reserved for field data reconstruction. While the files loaded into the recovery software, she opened a drawer and pulled out a worn notebook, her own. Inside were sketches, sonar maps, details of known dive paths near the Hudson Canyon. She flipped quickly, eyes darting across notes made in desperation months ago. "There were reports from Fisherman," she muttered half to herself. "Signals lost, strange currents, damaged equipment, all of it dismissed. But I catalogued it anyway." Jack watched her, arms crossed. "And you think this is connected?" "I don't think anything," she said, softer now. "I know it." Silence stretched between them as the screen began decoding the GPS metadata hidden in one of the cleaner video files. Slowly, a map appeared. Coordinates: latitude and longitude deep within the canyon's eastern rift. A no-go zone for commercial craft. Too deep, too unstable. "I've never seen a dive go that far out," Emma whispered. "Not without heavy support." Jack looked at the data. His jaw tightened. Then whoever took that camera either didn't come back or wasn't supposed to. Emma didn't respond. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She could already feel the questions piling up again, not just about the crew or the footage, but about what else was down there, and why no one ever wanted to talk about it. She turned to Jack. "If you're not ready to find out what they saw," she said, voice even, "this is where you walk away." He didn't blink. "I didn't come this far to walk away from anything." Emma's fingers danced over the keyboard as the software processed the corrupted files. The lab was dim now, hours slipping by unnoticed, the hum of machinery the only constant. Jack stood near the door, arms folded, silent as stone. Neither had spoken since the coordinates appeared. There was a tension in the air, like standing on the edge of something vast and unseen. The progress bar reached 100%. Emma clicked the first recovered file. A date flashed on screen 2 years ago, one day before the team was declared missing. The video began inside a submersible, a low-lit cockpit, panels glowing red. The camera operator, probably wearing a chest mount, turned to show 2 researchers seated behind the pilot. One of them was Caleb Rowe. His expression was calm, even eager. "No one's been this far down in this sector," he said, voice clear. "They said we wouldn't get a signal, but I'm betting we'll prove them wrong." Emma inhaled sharply. Jack said nothing. The submersible descended. Depth indicators climbed. The outside world beyond the windows turned to pitch. Lights on the hull illuminated odd rock formations, unnatural angles, jagged patterns like fractured architecture. Emma paused the video, rewound, played again in slow motion. "These aren't just rocks," she murmured. Jack leaned closer. "What are they?" "I don't know. They look designed." She resumed the footage. As the sub approached the trench wall, the camera caught flickers of movement outside. Faint, distant, shadows flowing faster than current. No one in the cockpit reacted. Either they didn't see or didn't want to acknowledge it. The next file was audio only. It began with routine logging, technical jargon, dive depth, oxygen levels. Then something shifted. Static cut through, followed by voices rising in confusion. "Reading a pressure spike. Where is that coming from?" Then Caleb again, urgent this time. "Shut it down, bring us back." Another voice, female. "No, wait, look at that." Then the unmistakable sound of metal groaning under strain. Screaming. Static. The clip ended. Emma looked over at Jack. His eyes were fixed on the screen, unmoving. She loaded the final video. It was degraded, grainy, but the timestamp showed it was the last recorded file, and the only one with an open log. Dive point 17, secondary descent. The footage picked up mid-dive, the sub already deep. The cabin lights flickered. The camera trembled, as though the operator's hands were shaking, or as though something outside was affecting the sub's integrity. Through the porthole, the trench opened like a wound. Something glimmered below, blue-white, pulsing, not like any marine bioluminescence Emma had seen before. The camera zoomed in. There, barely visible, was a shape. Towering, not alive, not machine. Geometric patterns etched into stone or something like it. Carvings that glowed faintly as the sub approached. Then the screen filled with light. The glow burst, flooding the cabin. The crew's voices surged, panic, disbelief, pain. Caleb's voice was the last thing captured. "It's watching us!" The file cut off. Emma pushed back from the desk, her face pale. "That's not geological," she whispered. "It's not even natural. It was built." Jack rubbed his face, the room suddenly too quiet. "Who'd build something that deep?" he asked. Emma shook her head. "No one we know. No one from here." She looked at the coordinates again. Whatever they found, it wasn't meant to be seen. The words hung heavy. Jack didn't reply. But inside, something had shifted. The sea had always held ghosts. Now it held questions too. For weeks after the expedition disappeared, the news had cycled through the usual theories: mechanical failure, strong currents, even sabotage. The Aegir, the research vessel carrying Caleb Rowe's team, had vanished without a trace. No debris, no signal, no answers. Emma remembered the press conferences, stiff-suited officials from the Oceanic Exploration Agency giving calm, calculated responses. "We're investigating all possibilities. The safety of our researchers remains our top priority. The area has been deemed unstable, and all operations are suspended until further notice." But behind the words, she'd seen the evasion, the deliberate omissions. The way questions about deep-sea anomalies were brushed aside, and when she tried to follow up, asking about the final dive logs, the emergency beacon protocols, emails went unanswered. One call ended with a firm warning: "We advise you to stop pursuing this matter, Ms. Grayson." Now, watching Caleb's last recorded words on Jack's laptop, she understood why. Jack sat across from her, arms crossed. "You're telling me they knew something was down there?" Emma nodded. "Or found something they couldn't explain and someone decided it was better buried." Who would do that? The same people who declared the entire canyon a restricted zone 48 hours after the signal was lost. She reached for her notebook, flipping to an old page, a list of names. The crew of the Aegir, 11 people. Scientists, divers, technicians. Each had been cleared, vetted, experienced in deep-sea conditions. Not thrill-seekers, not amateurs. Professionals who didn't make mistakes easily. She tapped the paper. "They were the best team I ever worked with, and they vanished like smoke." Jack leaned back. His eyes drifted to the corner of the lab, where the camera still sat on the shelf, wrapped in a towel. "And you think this footage is what got them killed?" Emma looked at him, steady. "I think they found something that wasn't supposed to be found, and when they tried to document it, something or someone made sure they wouldn't come back." She paused, then added, "But the ocean doesn't keep secrets forever." Jack's gaze returned to the list. His fingers hovered above the names. "You said this Caleb was your friend." She nodded once. "He believed the trench had a hidden flaw, said he'd seen sonar patterns that looked like ruins." "Ruins?" Jack scoffed lightly. "Not Atlantis," Emma said, tone flat. "But something old. Older than human civilization. He thought maybe we'd missed something fundamental about how the seafloor formed. Maybe something artificial influenced it." Jack didn't answer. Instead, he stood and walked to the window. The harbor below was dark, quiet, the water rippling with lazy indifference. "Men like that," he said slowly, "they don't just vanish, not without help." Emma agreed silently. They sat in thought for a long moment. The lab lights buzzed overhead, casting pale circles across the desk. Outside, wind scraped against the siding, a reminder of the sea's endless, patient pull. Finally, Jack spoke. "So, what do we do now?" Emma turned to her screen, where the coordinates still glowed. "We go to where they went," Jack frowned. "You want to dive that trench?" "No, not yet, but we can get close. Map it, listen." He hesitated. "And if someone's watching?" Emma smiled faintly, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Then maybe it's time someone watched back." Jack said nothing, but he didn't object. Somewhere in the silence between them, a quiet agreement formed, unspoken, but binding. They weren't chasing ghosts anymore. They were chasing the truth, and whatever lay beneath that ocean had already started to stir. 2 days later, Jack stood on the deck of the Mary Grace, staring at the empty horizon. The sun hadn't risen yet. The sea was flat, slate gray, as if waiting. Emma moved behind him, checking the gear again. Portable sonar, recording devices, an older hydrophone unit she'd rigged herself. Her movements were brisk, precise. No nervous energy, just quiet purpose. Neither had spoken much since deciding to return to the coordinates. There wasn't much to say. They both understood the risk. But something had shifted between them. An unspoken partnership forged not in trust, but in the need for truth. Jack finally broke the silence. "You sure about this?" Emma didn't look up. "No, but I'd rather regret knowing than wonder the rest of my life." He nodded once. That was enough. As they finished loading the last of the equipment, a voice called from the dock. "You're heading east?" Jack turned to see an old man standing near the fuel station, grey beard, fisherman's coat, one eye cloudy. Harold Langley. Local legend or lunatic, depending on who you asked. Jack narrowed his eyes. "What's it to you?" Harold stepped closer, voice dropping. "Storm's coming from the south. Currents will be wrong out there. We'll manage. You're not going to the trench, are you?" Jack said nothing. Harold exhaled, slow and heavy. "That place doesn't forgive. You go far enough out, it's not just water. It's something else." Emma stepped forward. "You've been near it?" "Once," he said. "Years ago, nets came up shredded. Compass spun for hours." "Never went back?" Jack turned away. "Appreciate the warning." Harold didn't follow. "The ocean doesn't like being watched. It remembers who tries." With that, he walked off into the fog. Emma didn't speak until they were well beyond the breakwater, the harbour falling behind. "Do people around here always talk like cryptic prophets?" "Only when they're serious," Jack muttered. They reached the outer shelf by midday. Emma activated the sonar. The device pinged, its readout displaying the ocean floor beneath them like a jagged wound, stretching far into the darkness. Jack studied the depth readings. "These numbers make sense to you?" Emma frowned. "They shouldn't. The elevation's too sharp here. There's a vertical drop that isn't on any chart." She adjusted the hydrophone, lowered it slowly. A low hum filtered through the speaker, then beneath it something else. Faint, irregular pulses, not natural wave interference, not mechanical, rhythmic. Jack leaned in. "That's not sonar bounce." "No," Emma agreed. "That's something alive." They recorded the data, overlaying coordinates, noting the fluctuation patterns. Emma's voice was calm, but her eyes betrayed the storm building behind them. They weren't chasing theories anymore. They had something real, something that pulsed in the deep, older than machines, more deliberate than tide. Hours passed in near silence. Every pass with the sonar mapped a clearer picture, slopes, ridges, and a central crater. Emma pointed to the center. "That's where they went down." Jack nodded. "And maybe where they stayed." As the sun dipped toward the horizon, the wind began to rise. Jack checked the pressure. "We've got 3 hours max before this turns rough." Emma packed up the sensors, sealing the logs. "That's enough for now. We have data. We know where to look." Jack turned the boat slowly, eyes scanning the waves. For a second, something in the distance shimmered, like a shadow slipping beneath the surface. He blinked. It was gone. "Let's get back," he said. Emma didn't ask what he saw. Maybe she saw it too. As they headed home, the first drops of rain began to fall, soft as breath. And behind them, beneath the waves, something listened. The second trip out felt different. The sea was unnaturally calm, the kind of stillness that made seasoned sailors uneasy. No gulls, no distant foghorns, just the soft slap of waves against the hull. Jack stood at the helm, jaw tight, eyes scanning the horizon with quiet suspicion. Emma worked silently beside him, adjusting cables, syncing sonar frequencies, double-checking the dive markers they had set days earlier. They were returning to the same coordinates, this time with better equipment and a specific goal, to locate physical remnants of the Aegir or the submersible, anything left behind. Something that proved what they'd seen on the footage was real. Jack had anchored in hundreds of places in his life, but as the boat slowed and the anchor chain rattled down into the trench's mouth, he felt something clench in his chest. Not fear, not quite. Instinct. Emma lowered the drop camera into the water, feeding the cable slowly, watching the monitor as darkness consumed the screen. The floodlights pierced only a few feet ahead before dissolving into ink. At 400 feet, the camera picked up turbulence, fine silt clouds drifting across a rocky field. Emma adjusted the lighting, narrowing the beam. Then, something caught her breath. "Jack," she whispered, pointing. A twisted piece of metal jutted from the silt, curved, smooth, marked with deep gouges like claw marks or pressure tears. Jack stared at it. "That's from a hull." Emma zoomed in. The object was partially buried but unmistakably artificial. Further scans revealed more. Torn cables, a scorched panel, fragments of tempered glass. "That's part of the sub," Emma said. "There's no way this drifted here." Jack leaned closer. Then something dragged it. They dropped a second camera. This one sank lower, moving along a narrow ridge. The audio feed crackled, but no unusual signals yet. Emma switched to sonar again. The image refreshed. A large, uneven mass appeared to their right, too large to be debris. It shifted. For a second, Jack thought the sonar was malfunctioning. But then the shape rippled only slightly, and the audio picked up a sound. Low, resonant, almost organic. Emma's hands froze on the controls. "Did you see that?" Jack didn't respond. His eyes hadn't left the screen. The mass was gone, replaced by static. The system rebooted itself. Emma swore under her breath. "We've lost visual. Resetting the feed." Jack backed away. "We're not alone out here." Emma didn't argue. She moved through the diagnostic steps quickly, but her hands trembled. The sonar returned a few minutes later. The trench was empty again, clean, still, as if what they'd seen had never been there. "We have to get samples," she said. "If we can get material from that wreckage—" "No," Jack cut in. "We mark the site and leave." Emma stared at him, caught between duty and survival. "We're this close." Jack met her eyes. And one step from the edge. Silence. Then a thud. Both turned. The sound had come from the stern. Emma ran up, Jack close behind. The deck was clear, nothing there. But the surface of the water was moving. Not in waves, but rippling outward. As if something had breached silently beneath them. Emma stepped back. "That's not a fish." "No," Jack muttered. "It's a warning." They hauled up the equipment fast, coiling cables, shutting down sensors. The sky above had begun to grey, a thin layer of clouds filtering the sun like gauze. They left without speaking, the Mary Grace cutting a clean line back to shore. Behind them, the sea returned to stillness, and in that stillness something waited. Emma barely slept after they returned. She spent hours replaying the sonar data, zooming into every spike and anomaly, isolating frequencies from the audio feed that didn't match anything in the Institute's marine catalogue. Her apartment, once orderly and precise, now resembled a storm of charts, notebooks, and coffee-stained printouts. The wreckage they'd found wasn't enough. The shadows on the sonar weren't enough. She needed more. She needed proof, unshakable, undeniable. Jack noticed the change quickly. Emma barely responded to texts, and when she did, her replies were clipped, distracted. When he visited the lab 3 days later, he found her asleep at the desk, monitors glowing, a pen still clutched in her fingers. "You're pushing too hard," he said when she stirred. Emma blinked at him, dazed, then shook her head. "We're close. There's something buried beneath that trench, something that wasn't made by time or tide." Jack didn't argue, but something in her eyes unnerved him. She wasn't chasing a mystery anymore. She was chasing something personal, something deeper than truth. That night he stood alone on his porch, watching the tide roll in under a crescent moon. He hadn't told Emma about the dream. In it, he was back on the Mary Grace, only the ocean was silent. Not calm, silent. No wind, no waves, no sound. Just black water stretching in all directions. Then came the voice, low, soft, not quite human. "You brought it back." He always woke gasping. Jack had lived with loss. He understood grief's tricks. But this felt different. It wasn't just memory. It was presence, like something had followed them home. The next morning, Emma showed him a sketch. "It's not just a trench," she said, pointing to a crude outline of the sonar map. "Look at this formation. It repeats. Symmetrical." Jack frowned. "You're saying it's a structure?" Emma nodded. "Maybe a temple or a gate." He stared at her. "To what?" She didn't answer. Later, Jack found her in the Institute's submersible bay. She was inspecting the old Solo sub, a small one-person craft used for short-range deep dives. Its paint was chipped. The hull showed rust scars. But she looked at it like salvation. You planning something I should know about? He asked. Emma hesitated. If we can get it running, we could get closer. The cameras aren't enough. I need to see it with my own eyes. Jack's stomach turned. That sub's rated for 600 meters max. You go deeper than that, you're trusting a miracle. She didn't look away. Then I'll take the risk. He stepped forward. You think Caleb would have wanted this? Emma froze, then quieter. He would have gone. I think he did go. Jack shook his head. And he didn't come back. Their silence stretched like taut wire. Finally, Emma turned back to the sub. I'm not asking you to come with me. You're not going alone. I have to. Jack didn't answer. Not then. The next few days passed in quiet dread. Jack worked on his boat, tightening every bolt, inspecting the engine, checking emergency gear twice. Emma spent every spare hour in the Institute's basement, poring over old dive logs, schematics, fragmenting deeper into obsession. One night Jack woke to something strange. The tide was wrong, too loud. He stepped outside and found nothing unusual, except for the kelp, piles of it, tangled on the rocks below, twisted into shapes he couldn't name. He didn't tell Emma. He just watched her drift further away, piece by piece. And in his gut, he knew. She wasn't preparing for a dive. She was preparing for a descent. The submersible was gone. Jack knew it the moment he stepped into the Institute's storage bay and saw the empty cradle where it used to rest. The straps had been unbuckled with care. No signs of damage, no signs of haste. Emma had taken it. His chest tightened, anger and dread colliding like waves in a storm. He turned on his heel, bolting out of the bay and into the cold morning light. The harbor was empty except for the Mary Grace, bobbing gently in her moorings. He climbed aboard, started the engine, and pushed into the fog. No hesitation, no questions, just one direction, east. As the coastline fell away behind him, Jack's thoughts raced. Emma had said nothing, no message, no note, just vanished into the deep, alone. And yet, part of him understood. She had crossed a line long before she took the sub. Her mind had already sunk where her body was now headed. She hadn't been looking for evidence anymore. She'd been looking for him. Caleb. Jack gritted his teeth, steering through the chop. The wind had picked up, thickening the air with salt and cold. The sea ahead looked the same as always, flat, endless. But now he saw the truth. It wasn't still. It was watching. 2 hours later, he reached the trench site. The sonar was dead. Jack tried twice, then gave up. He switched to the hydrophone, adjusted the receiver, static. Then, a faint voice. He froze. Don't follow. Can't. Too deep. It was Emma. Her voice cracked through the speaker, distorted but unmistakable. The message wasn't live. It was a loop. A distress ping auto-triggered by depth or pressure loss. She was trying to send a warning. Jack swallowed hard. Where are you? He powered up the external sensors, scanning the water. Nothing. Then, just past the stern, he saw it. A dark shape beneath the surface, cylindrical, unmoving. The submersible, floating upward, too slow, as if being returned rather than rising. He grabbed the radio. Emma, respond, I see the sub. No answer. He pulled alongside and hooked the craft. The hull was intact, no breaches. The lights inside still blinked. But she wasn't there. Only her notebook sealed in a plastic bag. Jack opened it with trembling hands. The last entry was brief. There's a structure, columns, not rock, not coral, it's calling. I'm going in. Nothing else. Jack stared at the words. The ink had bled slightly, like it had been written just before pressure breached the seal. He scanned the horizon, heart pounding, searching for anything, any sign. Then the water rippled, not from current, from something moving. The sea lifted in a wide, slow bulge, as if something massive passed just beneath. No shape, no sound, just the shift, and then the pull. Jack's boat tilted slightly. He backed away, dragged the sub's hook tighter, lashed it to the deck. He didn't call the Coast Guard. He didn't call the Institute. He sat down at the console and pressed record. "My name is Jack Mallory," he said, voice steady. "If someone finds this recording, I need you to understand there's something in the Hudson Canyon, something old. Something that remembers." He paused, eyes scanning the horizon. "She went looking for answers. I came looking for her. But I think what's down there doesn't care why you come." He stopped the recording, locked the notebook in the cabin's safe, looked one last time at the water. And for the first time in decades, Jack Mallory felt fear the way he had when he lost his son, sudden, raw, paralyzing. Only this time, it didn't come from within. It came from below. Far below the surface, the water became something else. It wasn't just pressure that changed. It was time, direction, thought. Emma felt it the moment she passed 800 meters. The sub's controls became sluggish. The lights dimmed and the hum of the ocean outside grew louder. Not in volume, but in presence. As if it wasn't water surrounding her, but a living thing breathing slowly around the craft. Her descent had begun with data, coordinates, sonar grids, oxygen levels, but all of that dissolved into instinct the deeper she went. She was no longer recording, she was following. The trench opened before her like a great mouth. Columns rose from the seafloor, massive, uneven, covered in growth that looked more like scales than coral. Structures, too symmetrical to be natural, too alien to be human. Stone, or something like it, etched with patterns that pulsed faintly in the dark. She drifted closer, the sub humming with strain. The lights caught movement, something sliding along the base of one of the pillars. She tried to focus, but the cameras wouldn't lock on. It was as if whatever moved didn't want to be seen. Then came the voice. Not through the speakers, not through the hull. Inside her head, not words, not even language, just sensation, invitation, recognition. She reached forward, pressing her hand against the glass of the viewport. The light changed. What had once been dim bioluminescence now flared into radiant patterns, swirling around the base of the trench like circuitry coming online. The pillars responded, vibrating with harmonic resonance, low and deep, vibrating through her bones. Emma blinked, dazed. "It's alive," she whispered. Then the face appeared, not human, not monstrous, something in between, eyes like twin orbs of dull silver. No mouth, no nose. It floated just outside the sub, unmoving, studying her with the patience of something that had waited a very long time. Emma's breath caught. It wasn't attacking. It wasn't fleeing. It was welcoming. She reached for the camera controls, but they were dead. The screen had gone black. A new sensation filled the cabin, a weightlessness, a drift inward. As if the trench itself had opened a corridor and was drawing her in. She should have felt fear. She felt wonder. Then the voice returned, clearer now. "You were not meant to find this." Behind the words, another feeling, sorrow. The sub shook, the lights flared, then died. A high-pitched tone filled the cabin. Emma screamed, clutching her head. Outside the viewport, the face had changed. Its eyes narrowed. Its glow pulsed brighter, then surged into blinding white. Everything vanished. On the surface, Jack waited. The hydrophone was silent now. Even the looped message had stopped. The sub's signal was gone. He stared at the water for what felt like hours, but the sun never moved. The clouds hung overhead like a lid, pressing down. He replayed her last words over and over. "There's a structure. It's calling. I'm going in." He looked to the horizon. Nothing, just water. Then from the speaker, one final sound. Not a voice, not static. A whisper. It's not a place. It's alive. And then silence, absolute and final. Jack sat down on the deck, eyes wide. He had come too late. But part of her hadn't left. And something else had returned with her voice. The sub drifted to the surface like an empty shell. Jack hauled it aboard alone, the winch groaning under the strain. He didn't expect to find her inside, and he was right. There was nothing. No blood, no breach. Just the sealed compartment with Emma's notebook inside. The hatch had never been opened. She had vanished mid-descent, leaving only silence and ink behind. He sat in the cabin for hours, staring at the pages. Her notes grew more frantic the deeper she went. Drawings of shapes, symbols, wave patterns, many of them repeating. She'd circled phrases again and again. It's listening. It remembers. They came before us. One entry was different, scribbled in large, urgent letters. It's not physical. It's not alone. Jack closed the notebook and set it gently beside the console. The sea was flat, grey, indifferent, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone. By the time he reached harbour, the clouds had thickened, the wind sharpened. The Mary Grace creaked as he docked. No one was waiting, no questions were asked. That's how things worked in towns like his. When someone came back looking the way he did, people didn't ask. But others did. 2 days later, 3 black SUVs rolled into the harbour. Suits stepped out. Quiet, stern, efficient. Oceanic Exploration Agency. They said little, but their message was clear. The equipment was being impounded. The camera, the sub, the logs, even Emma's notebook. Jack protested once. The reply was firm. You were never there, Mr. Mallory. None of this happened. He stood in the parking lot as they loaded everything away. He didn't fight it. What could he say? That the ocean had stolen someone else? That it had whispered through wires and dreams? The lead agent gave him a final glance. Not hostile, just clinical. For your own good, walk away. Jack didn't answer. He just watched them disappear down the road, taking the truth with them. He went home and didn't leave for weeks. But silence couldn't hold forever. Late one night, he powered up the old laptop. He still had copies, fragments Emma had sent to him before the dive. Video segments, audio distortions, static frames. He uploaded one to an anonymous server, then another, then another. He didn't expect anyone to believe, but someone did. Within days, the clips began circulating through niche forums, diving communities, paranormal networks, fringe science threads. Debates exploded, arguments raged. Some said it was CGI, others swore it matched known sonar glitches. A few recognized the coordinates. And one voice, buried deep in the comments, simply posted, "We lost people there too." The videos went viral. Mainstream attention followed. Jack shut it all down, deleted his accounts, burned the originals. He didn't want fame. He didn't want credit. He wanted silence. But the ocean didn't let go so easily. A week later, a new video surfaced, not posted by Jack, not one he recognized. It was short, 30 seconds, grainy, distorted. It showed Emma, not in the sub, not in any lab, underwater, her face barely visible through shimmering blue, her eyes open, her expression serene. She was smiling. Then the frame cracked with static, and a whisper. "Don't look for me." The video disappeared within hours, every link broken, every file scrubbed. Jack didn't try to retrieve it. He just sat in the dark, the sound of the sea pressing against his windows like breath. She wasn't gone. Not really. But whatever had her now wasn't going to let go. Jack didn't speak to anyone for days after the video. He unplugged his landline, shut the curtains, and let the world turn without him. Every creak of the house made him flinch. Every whisper of wind outside sounded like something returning. He knew it wasn't rational, but rationality had drowned with Emma. Then the knocking started. Not once, not loud. Just a single tap, some nights, around 2 a.m., always the same. At the back door, the one that faced the sea. He never opened it. Instead, he returned to the only thing he could control, Emma's voice. He had copies. Hidden, fragmented backups. Files she'd saved under random names and cryptic dates. Most were corrupted, some refused to play. But one afternoon, he found something new. A recovered fragment labeled Song 7. The clip was only 8 seconds long. It started with static, then a whisper, Emma's voice unmistakable. "It's not death, it's translation." Then silence. Jack stared at the waveform, replaying it over and over. He didn't know what she meant, but it echoed in his skull like a bell underwater. Word spread. The conspiracy forums were ablaze. Theories mutated into movements. Some claimed Emma had never existed. Others believed she'd discovered proof of a hidden civilization, something ancient that predated humanity. There were even maps, dozens, charting the Hudson Canyon and overlaying patterns from her sonar scans, claiming geometric alignments with stars, with ruins, with God knows what. Jack ignored them all, but when a message arrived through an encrypted inbox, he read it. The sender was anonymous. The content was short. We saw it too. Different ocean. Same eyes. Attached was a single image, a sonar capture from the Mariana Trench. It showed a shape, not identical to what Jack had seen, but similar and large. He closed the laptop. It wasn't just one place. The ocean was littered with them, whatever they were. A week later, a journalist showed up, young, polite, persistent, said she'd driven 6 hours just to talk. Jack didn't let her in, but through the screen door he listened. There are others looking now, deep-sea privateers, treasure hunters, the Navy. They're all circling that trench. Something changed when those files went public. Jack said nothing. They think you're a hoax, she added, or a prophet. He didn't correct her. She left a card. He never called. But the dreams returned. Not of Emma. Of the trench. Of the face outside the sub. Of a feeling, not terror, not awe, but inevitability. The kind of recognition you only get when something ancient opens its eyes and realizes you're still here. One night, Jack stood at the shoreline, waves crawling around his boots, moonlight dragging shadows across the rocks. He held a recorder in one hand. Pressed play. Emma's voice played again. It's not death, it's translation. He whispered to the sea, I want to understand. The tide responded, rolling in stronger, colder. The wind carried a sound he couldn't place, like a voice underwater, calling not his name, but something deeper than names. That night he started building, old parts, boat upgrades, reinforcements, a descent capsule. He knew what it meant. But he didn't fear it, not anymore. Emma hadn't disappeared, she'd crossed, and he was going to follow. The morning Jack left, the sky was clear. He rose before dawn, methodical and calm, as if preparing for just another day at sea. But the cabin felt different, emptier, quieter. As he packed, he paused once at the fireplace where Emma's notebook rested. He ran his fingers across the cover, then tucked it into his jacket. On the dock, the Mary Grace waited. The old boat had been stripped down, rebuilt in places. A reinforced hull, custom oxygen supply, winch-mounted descent pod, a crude capsule, barely safe, but functional. He didn't need to return. He only needed to reach. Jack scribbled a final log into a small journal. He kept it brief. If this is found, I went on my own terms. She wasn't lost, she was taken or invited, and I couldn't let her go alone. He slid the book into a waterproof case, bolted it near the helm. Then, with slow precision, he cast off. No fanfare, no final glance, just the old man, the boat, and the sea. The journey was slow, the waves gentle. As he moved beyond the harbor, the radio picked up static. Then a whisper, just for a moment. Still watching. Jack smiled. By the time he reached the coordinates, the sun was high, casting sharp reflections across the water. The trench waited below, unseen, unchanged. He secured the capsule, set the dive parameters, checked the seals. Then, one last time, he stared out at the ocean that had taken everything, and stepped inside. The descent was smooth. Silent, meters became hundreds, then thousands. Outside, the light disappeared. Darkness returned, not black, but something deeper, richer, moving in currents he couldn't feel. The pod's lights flickered. The pressure gauges trembled. At 2,300 meters, the camera shorted. At 2,500, the audio cut. At 2,650, the capsule stopped. Not mechanically. It paused as if suspended, not by ballast or rope, but by intention. Outside the window, shapes shifted. Faint outlines, towering structures. The same pillars Emma had described, only now lit by a glow that seemed to pulse with thought. Jack placed his hand on the glass. And they came. Figures, neither fish nor man, fluid forms, eyes like moons, limbs like vapor. They did not approach. They waited. Then from below light erupted, cold and vast, and in the light, Emma. Not as she was, not fully human, not altered either. Just changed. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. He understood. It wasn't a place. It was a crossing. She reached out, palm against the glass. Jack mirrored her. The light enveloped everything, and then nothing. Weeks later, the Mary Grace was found drifting 70 miles south of the original coordinates. Engine off, pod empty, no logbook, no Jack. Only a single item remained. Emma's notebook, carefully sealed, resting in the wheelhouse. Inside, a new page had been added. Handwritten, unmistakably his. I saw her. I went through. I'm not coming back. The notebook was archived, classified, buried in files marked oceanic anomalies, unacknowledged. But copies leaked, and among the communities that still whispered of the trench, a new phrase emerged. Not warning, not threat, invitation. The ocean keeps its secrets, but stories have a way of surfacing. In the years after Jack Mallory and Emma Grayson vanished, the tale of the Hudson Canyon crossing became legend among deep-sea explorers, conspiracy theorists, and those who lingered on the fringes of science. Some dismissed it as myth, a ghost story spun from tragedy and loneliness. Others hunted for proof, scouring the ocean for clues. Still, there were those who believed quietly that the sea had opened a door and two souls had simply stepped through. The notebooks circulated, first as digital leaks, then as photocopies traded in late-night bars and encrypted chat rooms. Emma's sketches, spirals, columns, shifting currents, were analyzed by everyone from oceanographers to codebreakers. Some claimed to find mathematical patterns, hidden messages, coordinates for other places where the water ran deep and strange. Jack's last words echoed loudest. I saw her. I went through. I'm not coming back. The phrase became a mantra for a new generation of seekers, people drawn not to danger or glory but to understanding. There were rumors, always. Boats going dark on calm nights, sonar glitches, divers returning with stories of lights far below the safe depths. Fishermen off the Maine coast swore sometimes they heard voices on the wind. Emma's laughter, Jack's steady baritone. Nothing that could be proven, but nothing anyone wanted to disprove either. At the Marine Institute, a plaque was quietly placed in the lobby, in memory of those who search for truth beneath the waves. No names, just the outline of a boat and a single stylized column, Emma's design. And sometimes online a new video would appear, 30 seconds of blue-green haze, a shape moving in the dark, a fleeting glimpse of a face, serene and smiling. They vanished as quickly as they appeared. No one claimed them, but they always ended the same way. A single line of static, then a whisper. It's not death, it's translation. As the legend spread, more people were drawn to the edge of the unknown. Some returned, changed. Others didn't return at all. The sea, after all, is patient. And some mysteries are content to wait. For those listening now wondering what's real, remember every story begins as a question. Some end in answers, some in silence, and some, like this one, become the currents beneath our lives, shaping us, haunting us, calling us to look deeper. If this journey pulled you under, if you felt the tide of the unknown, don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this, tales that refuse to stay buried, mysteries that invite you to keep searching. And if you're not ready to surface yet, there's more waiting for you. Click the suggested video now showing on your screen and let the next mystery carry you a little further from the shore. Because sometimes what you find out there isn't meant to be feared. It's meant to be discovered, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is follow the call, wherever it leads.